And I'm Genevieve Fowler, the daughter of Aaron Call and Samantha Willie Call. We moved into the community of Syracuse in about 1906. Father bought a 80-acre farm out near the lake. I don't know what else.
Well, it wasn't right near the lake.
Wasn't it?
It was up, in the better part of town, up where the Bennetts live and the Hatches live. That's where we live.
I believe it was on 1,000 west and about 3,000 south as we have it numbered now.
I think that was it. I didn't remember exactly the name, but
well, I can remember if our pasture must have been down by the lake, because I can remember of going to the pasture, bringing the cows home, and playing along the lake before bringing the cows in. So we must have been.
Yeah, we'd have to get on our ponies to go to the pasture. It was far enough away that we'd have to ride our little pony down. And on the way back, with the Hatch, Sammy Hatch and Gladys Hatch, and myself, we'd get a hold of cows' tails and drag ourselves home. And we had more fun doing that, chasing those cows and letting them drag us on the road. And our poor shoes. You should have seen our clothes and our shoes after we got home. And Father wondered why those cows didn't give the milk that night. The night that we run them so much that they would not give the milk down. And Father would say, I can't imagine. I think he knew, but he was just testing us to see what we would say. But we didn't say a word about it. Well, that's what, but that way we had to have a little bit of fun.
Well, Father built a new home when we moved into Syracuse.
Yes.
A 2-story home, and that was burned. That was burned to the ground.
You might tell us a little bit about the fire. I think you had 2 fires, didn't you?
Yes, we did.
If you could, just tell us a little bit about the fires.
You maybe remember more than I do about
well,
that.
I remember we had a nice new home, and we had to sleep upstairs, the family, the girls, all had to sleep upstairs. And the boys had to get up early in the morning and go out and do the chores. But Russell was there, and before he went out, he made a big fire in our big coal stove. And Genevieve was saying that he left the lid off from one of the stoves. He didn't put it on tight. And the fire, he made such a big hot fire to make it hot warm enough so when we got up we'd have a place to sit and enjoy it. But he forgot to put the lid back on the stove after he put the coal in. And when he went out to do the chores, he was out there quite a while, and he smelled all of the smoke. He wondered, oh, what in the world's going on? And we hadn't gotten up out of bed. We were still upstairs in bed, the whole family of us. And the boys come running in the house to wake us up, and they had to carry us out of there and help us out. We were quite small, but they got us all out safe. All but Clark, wasn't it, Clark?
Well, wait, Lorena, I can remember this. Father came into the room, and as he'd pick each one of us up, he'd wrap us in a quilt and run outside and set us on the ditch bank.
Yes.
There was a ditch bank, and he did that to all of us except our one brother. And Mother would run up and down the ditch bank counting us and counting our names and wanting us to answer it. Well, there's so many kids, and she'd say Clark, Cleo, Daryl, and Ben, all of them, and one of them didn't answer. And Mother said, oh, Clark isn't here. And they said, well, they didn't know whether they could get in there and get him out or not. The fire was just about out. And Father did run back in with the quilt over his head. He took it off one of us kids, put the quilt over his head and ran in. And he picked Clark up out of the bed. And just as he got through the door, it collapsed. The whole home collapsed. So we always kind of felt like he was a special child.
And he was.
And he really was.
He really turned out to be very special.
And then after the fire, so many of the neighbors and relatives all came to help, you know. And they took each one of us kids, some of them took each one of us and we stayed in their homes. I'd like to remember who I stayed with, but I don't. And stayed with our neighbors and friends until the folks could get situated. And then Lorena can tell you more from that, about where it was and that.
Well, each of the families made a dress apiece for we girls. And before nightfall, next day, we all had an outfit that our lovely neighbors had made for us.
Very nice.
It was wonderful. The people there in Syracuse were really great neighbors, and we were very close to them. And they just made all of those clothes. And my mother was a good sewer too. She sewed all the time and made all of our clothes, but they were all burned up. Mm-hmm. And she used to put lace on our little petticoats and panties, and our dresses were all covered in lace, and they were made beautifully. And Mother always saw to that. It was wonderful.
Could you tell us who some of your neighbors were that might have been involved there?
Yes, there was George Bennett, lived up north of us, up on the corner. They were very lovely friends. They were boyfriends of my one sister, Phil Bennett. Do you remember Phil Bennett?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And Nellie Bennett?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they were the ones. And they were our neighbors. And then there was Johnny Bennett that lived straight across east from us. They were up a little ways in east, all of us.
And Joe Willie lived joining our farm. Joe Willie.
Yes, he was
Right.
down at the bottom part.
Well,
Yes.
he was next.
Yes, way
Right, the
down.
bottom part of the farm was Joe Willie and his family.
And that was next to R.C. Willie's store. You know where that is? Well, our farm was connected. The bottom part of our farm was connected just across the street from R.C. Willie's store. That's the way you could identify it. And Joseph Willie used to come up through the field, every other day to visit Daddy. And he'd come out and sit in the kitchen. And honestly, it was really funny.
You better not tell that part.
He'd come and sit there when Mother was fixing breakfast. But he had to just come up. He loved to talk. And he'd talk and sit there, Mother fixing breakfast, and she had quite a time to get our breakfast over with, because Uncle Joe used to just love to come up and visit with Daddy. And he would antagonize him. Did you know him at all? You didn't know him at all?
No. So that sounds a little like Rufus. Maybe that he rubbed off on Rufus.
Rufus?
He liked to argue. He'd argue.
Yeah, that was his father.
He talked a lot.
Yes, he talked a lot. Well, so did Marion Willie. He was the brother. He talked a lot too. They all loved to talk. But I don't know, they were very lovely people, but they just used to come up, and poor Mother trying to cook breakfast, and she couldn't.
Where did you go after your fire?
You what?
Where did you go after your fire?
Oh, we went down to a big, out off the Bluff Road. You know where the Bluff Road is? Well, it was down next to the lake. Do you remember? Where off the Bluff Road, clear down to the bottom, that was west of our farm quite a ways.
Maybe that's where I got the water.
And we found
It's
a
at the
big
lake.
two-story house there. It was a big frame two-story house down by the lake. And we moved down there until we could get our home built again. And it was
Well, we built a new home. We started, the other was just completely demolished. We
Did
built
you-
a new home
Did you
Yes.
build it on the same property?
on the same.
Yes.
Same place where
Yes,
the
we
other
did.
house was?
Uh-huh. So that's how we had to do it. Now, what other things do you want to know about?
You mentioned 2 fires.
You had a second fire, didn't you, with your sheds or something later that fall?
We had a what?
Another fire?
The fire with the haystack and the shed.
Oh, yes.
Animals
Yes.
and things.
And Genevieve, you better tell them about what they told you about what started it.
I've heard from my brothers, the older one, say that it wasn't but a few months after we got into our new home. And we looked out and the haystacks and everything, it was early in the morning also, was a fire. And they figured that there had been somebody come and stayed overnight in there, how the Indians perhaps used to go through there. And they figured that was the only way it could have happened, is somebody's come walking through and went there for the night's lodging. And that's about all I can
It was
remember.
quite a mystery as to how that started.
There was horses and cattle, and a lot of them went too. Some of the horses got out, but I think the cows and some of the other animals were burned up too.
You remember, some of the things you used to do? You mentioned holding the cow's tail for entertainment or fun or activities.
You used to tell me today what some of them were. You used to go down the lake for
Oh,
potting
yes,
and-
what we did for entertainment and for a sort of a vacation. We couldn't afford to go on a big vacation, but Father and Mother would put us in this big header box. Do you know what a big header box was? And Mother would fix all the food and all the bedding, and the most of us slept in that header box when we went down to the lake, the flats, you know. And when we went down, we would play games. After we got there, we'd go out and play ball games and run races and go swimming, of course. And we'd be entertained. We'd spend the whole day and night down on the salt flats and sleep there. And
swim in the lake.
Father was a wonderful racer. He could run so fast. He was very fleet. And he could wrestle too. And he would put on a show for us down there. And that was the entertainment we had, of entertaining ourselves. The whole family played the ball together. You know, we had a ball team. There were enough of us that...
So many of us, we didn't need to go out to find friends.
That's right.
We're just friends among ourselves.
But it was wonderful. We enjoyed it so much. We just looked forward to going down to the lake bottoms and on the flats there and play all those games.
Now, you say there was 12 of you?
Yes, there were 2 pairs of twins, and we all just, we enjoyed ourselves. And Father and Mother were very strict people too. They lived the religion. I'll tell you.
Yes,
lived
they sure did.
And we had to live it too. We were taught just what was right and what was wrong, and we had to live it. We were very happy. But when we went to church, we took up a whole bench in the church. We had to sit up on the front row. Father was usually up on the stand, and he could watch us. So we had to be very careful what we did. And we were pretty good kids anyway, weren't we?
I guess.
But we tried. And they just, I don't know, that was, what was I going to tell about that? No. It was something else I was going to tell, but it slipped my memory. Well, anyway, Now, what else do you want to know? And then maybe it'll come back to
When
it.
you say you went over the church, was there at that point the amusement hall and the grove of trees there about that time you was growing up?
Yes, yes, there was.
Could you tell us some of the activities that happened there, or do you remember?
Oh, we'd always have a reunion, sort of a reunion out there. And we'd all get in
A ward reunion they used
and
to call it
race
ward
and
reunion.
have fun. And my sister and I used to sing at their parties. And my sister had a beautiful voice, Sister Cecil. It's the one that died. But she and I sang to all of their, well, a lot of their parties. And we enjoyed that. And Mother taught us to sing. She had a beautiful voice and she knew how to sing. And she taught us to sing. And we did that. And that was very enjoyable. And, well, it was just a family. We were just a big family.
Well,
that's
the
all.
ward parties is what he's asking about. Can you remember anything they did in the
About the
wards
ward
at the
parties?
parties? Isn't that what you're referring to?
I wondered if you had any.
Can you
Well, it
remember?
was the same, you know, just a regular, everybody from the church there participated, and we run races.
They
We'd go out
had
and have
dances.
sports.
They had dances. I can remember Mother and Father doing the two-step
Yes,
all around the hall.
yes, that's right.
And I was young, real young too, but I can remember that.
Yes, Father and Mother were good dancers, and they did they put on a show, dancing the two-step. And then we kids, I know I could play ball, and I could run races, and I usually won the races, and I had so many gifts that they had given me because I had won racing. I guess I was a real tomboy.
Took after your father then, if he was.
Yes, yes, I did, after Father run. And Father taught us to play ball and race.
You mentioned singing. Did anybody in the family play the piano or any instrument?
Oh, yes, and my brother Daryl sang beautifully. And he sang in Long Beach after all the time. And he taught dancing at a school of dancing in Long Beach, California.
And that's the way they made
And
their
they
living.
had, he and his wife taught. And they taught this couple with Lawrence Welk's show, Bobby and Sissy.
No, Bobby and Barbara.
Bobby and
Bobby
who?
and Barbara. They taught
Barbara,
them
was it?
dance.
That was their
Yes.
Yeah,
first
Bob-
one.
Barbara. Well, maybe that was it then.
Yeah, it was. That was the one that they taught.
Those two to dance. They got their start from my brother. And they're still dancing now. Well, you see the shows now, how they perform.
I watch them every Saturday night.
I do too.
They're
And I
enjoyable.
think it's wonderful. Well, that's the couple that they taught. And they were,
And I can remember the boys, Will and Russell, saying that they worked in the tomatoes, peeling tomatoes, or in the
oh yes.
factory was in Syracuse, I believe, and they used to go and work in the tomatoes in the fall.
Well,
Nobody else.
Did the community have a ball game at that time? Did they have community play ball?
yes. Oh yes. And at the school parties, we'd have ball games, and it was very nice. Or I mean, at the church parties, we'd have our ball games, and the children performed very well. And they had most of did most of all of it. The program was the young folks that did it. It's very enjoyable. Well, what else can we tell you?
How was the roads? Do you remember was they all oiled or some of them dirt, gravel?
Most of them were dirt. We didn't have anything good to drive on. We had to go in our buggies, and we'd go in a little buggy to school and have to hook up our horse and, unhook it when we got to school. And then the boys would try to hook it up for us, and then another bunch would come and unhook it. And they used to tease us like that, and they had us in hot water half the time. When the girls had to drive, you know, and take care of the buggies. and the
How old
horses.
were you when you got your first car? Your folks got your first car. Do you remember that?
That was in Burley.
Father had a Ford.
That was in Burley.
Uh-huh. It was a Ford, a Model T, I guess it would be, when the first ones.
Yes, it was.
Uh-huh.
And I remember him when he wanted to stop, you know. And the car, he'd get in, they were learning to drive the automobile. He got in, he'd go like this, and it wouldn't stop, and he'd holler, whoa, 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 whoa.
Sure
He'd
did.
get so excited.
Pull
The
back.
only way he could get it stopped was to turn in the gate and run into the haystack. That's the only way he could get it stopped.
He wasn't a very good driver.
Never was a very good driver.
He liked to drive horses, but the car, he just
Yeah.
didn't do a very good job.
When did you leave then for Burley?
In 1917.
So you was there about 11 years in Syracuse.
That's
Yes,
just about
uh-huh.
what it was.
Yes. But we had fun, even if we didn't have to work so hard.
Well, we lost a baby sister at 2 years old with pneumonia while we were living
Uh-huh.
in Syracuse.
That
and
was
she's-
one of the twins.
And she's buried in the Syracuse cemetery.
Is she buried in Syracuse there?
Uh-huh. And one of the lovely neighbors that lived there used to go in and put flowers on this little grave. Every time we'd go down there were nice, fresh flowers on that grave. And it was one neighbor that lived quite close to the cemetery that did that. We never could find out just who put those flowers on, but we knew it was a neighbor that did, and the one close by. And whoever that was, we never did find out. But that's the kind of people that was in Syracuse. They did things for each other. It was very nice.
What crops did you raise while you was in Syracuse? Do you remember that? What crops?
What crops? Oh, Father,
Strawberries, we had a lot of
He
strawberries.
had onions,
Onions and
a
strawberries.
lot of onions he sold, and hay, grain. We had to thin the beets, go out and thin the beets always. So
Now,
or was that
Piece
was in Burley when we did
Yes.
that, when we
Mhm.
thinned the beets?
I don't think we had beets in Syracuse.
No.
Don't think that was
I
beet
think
country.
your father was the first one to grow onions in Syracuse, that
Yes.
locality. The paper said he took I forget the acreage now, it wasn't too big, but he planted 4 varieties
Uh-huh.
and then tested each variety, and it listed there in the paper how many pound that would figure out per acre. But I think he was the first to grow onions in Syracuse.
Is that right?
Uh-huh.
Well, maybe you know more about it than we do.
Well, just what I read.
Uh-huh.
Well, I can remember talking about onions, you know.
Yes.
And it was
Still
the
grow a
onions
lot
we
of
probably
onions in that
thinned
country.
instead of beets.
I think we've kind of gotten Burley and Syracuse mixed up a little bit here then.
Well, that's natural.
Does it matter?
No.
But I know we had a lot of strawberries. I can remember
Oh,
they
yes.
built a tent like over it, and they'd pick the strawberries and put them under there until Father could take them into market. He would take them into Ogden to market.
You got beautiful strawberries, I know that.
Did you have fruit trees?
I don't remember, do you remember?
What's that?
Fruit
Fruit trees?
I don't hear too
Fruit
well.
trees, do you remember any of the fruit trees? Did we have fruit?
Oh, yes, apples and
Did we?
peaches. Yes, I know we had those too. I don't think that we had any other kind, apples and peaches. As I remember,
Oh, I don't remember that at all. I can't remember if anybody talking about fruit except strawberries.
You mentioned losing a sister at a young age. I guess the methods of burial and the funerals and the participation at funerals is considerably different than we have today. Do you remember a little bit about the funeral and the methods of burial?
well, no, I don't. I don't remember
Um,
just how they,
I remember we had the funeral was at home. And we had chairs brought in the home, all lined up, and people would come in and the casket would be open. Don't you remember this with Doris? I do.
I don't.
And I can remember this, but I was so young that I remember Father lifting me up and telling me to kiss her goodbye. And she just looked like a little wax doll, how beautiful she was. But I can remember the people coming in, and we had chairs all
Held in the home.
it was
Yes.
held in the home.
I remember them.
And the cemetery must not have been too far from our place, was it? It seemed like they took her out in a wagon or a surrey or some. I don't think they had
Well, they didn't have hearses or
anything like that. I think maybe just some friends took her out. I remember taking mine, putting them on a wagon or something like that, and going to the cemetery. But that's all I can remember about that.
In those days, the grave would be dug by hand too, I'm sure.
By
Yes.
my
Yes,
family
they
and
were.
relatives.
They were.
Mhm.
And the cemetery probably wasn't as nice looking as it is now.
Oh, no.
No,
I
it
left
is
open to
beautiful
family there
now.
for several years to take care of their own.
No, there weren't very many flowers and not too many graves either at the time.
I believe I asked, the one piece mentioned your brother Russell and a nice cream wagon, but you don't remember anything about that.
I don't. Did you, Genevieve?
I don't remember anyone talking about it at
No,
all.
I
I wouldn't remember it, I
don't
don't
know
think, but
where
I
they
didn't,
got that one, but
I don't remember hearing anything about it at
He was so busy on the farm. I don't think he had a
That
ice
time,
cream. I don't think he would have that because he worked on the farm. I'll tell you, they worked hard. The boys had to. Well, we all did.
But you said this was in the newspaper or
Mhm.
something? Well, he must have been, Marina.
Maybe just a short
I think
time
they
or
got
something.
mixed up on the person.
Could have done that.
How many horses, work horses, did you have?
Oh, let's see, I think Father had 4 or 5, and they were big horses. And we had 2 ponies. One little one that we girls rode was named Dolly. And I remember she had a little crooked left foot. And wherever we would go, Father says, I know where you girls have been. I saw the horse's foot. And the foot was turned over a little way like that. And we couldn't go anywhere but Daddy could find us if we were on that horse. And we did a lot of riding and had a lot of fun on them. But that's the only pleasure we would have, exactly, you know, chasing the cows and all that. Well, Mother used to give a lot of talks.
Where was the 2-story home that you moved into down at the bottoms when you had the first fire?
Well, I wish I could tell you the exact place, but it's way down next to the lake.
Was it a brick wood or a frame home?
I think it was a brick. And it was a big place, real large, upstairs, you know, the 2-story. And we used to have to take the buggy and horse from there to go to school.
Was it due south from where you lived or west?
It was west. It was down west where we lived. If you know where that is. I don't know where, and I can't remember whose home it was.
2-story.
But that's the only place we could find to move into after our home burned. And it was a long ways down there, it seemed to me. It seemed like an awful long ways. But,
Where was you from the church that was on 4,000? The little church there by Bodley's?
you mean, where was the home down on the...
In
Well, that was
relation to the
straight
church.
west. That was west, but I can't tell you just exactly.
Probably was in some home.
Could But that was, I would imagine that would be still standing down there. Unless they build it up around the lake, have they?
Torn it down for new buildings.
Uh-huh. I don't know, but it was quite a long ways down there.
We ought to, I'd like to get the pictures, Janine, we shoot this on, I won't get it for a book, but I'd like to, you can sit right there and, or,
Just tell us who they are, and show him, and he'll zoom in on them, and we get them made up, we'll be sure and get the right name
Do
on
you
the
want
right-
this one too?
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was my mother, Samantha Audra Willie Call. That was her name.
Okay. How old was she when she was married?
And you what?
How old was she when she was married?
Do you remember, Genevieve?
We read that today, 19.
19. And this was our father, Aaron Call.
Okay.
We were very proud of those two people.
Okay.
And then, is that enough of this one?
I think so.
And then, these are my mother's sisters. Shall I give the names?
Uh-huh.
All right, that was Grandpa Jeremiah Willie Call. That was the father and mother. And Annie Willie Call. That's our mother.
No, not Call. Annie Willie Thomas.
Annie Willie
Thomas.
Well,
She
I
wasn't
know,
a Call.
but that she was a Call later. She married my daddy.
Well, not Annie didn't, dear.
No, but mother did, up here.
Yeah, got to mother.
And then the children was Annie Thomas and then Samantha, oh, that's mother's name there,
Yes.
and Mary Hatch
Okay.
and Louise Call, Louis Call, and Rose Whitaker, and Lorena Bryson was one, and Myrtle Nelson, she lived in Bountiful. They just died just recently. And Lorraine, or Vern Stoker. That's it.
Now, does she tie in with the Stokers there in Syracuse?
Yes.
Would she be Alma Stoker's? Who'd she be related? How would she be related to Alma Stoker?
Well, I don't know that.
Okay, but
I
she is.
couldn't tell you. I don't remember Alma Stoker. That these people were all, I don't know whether they all
Well,
lived
that
in
isn't all of
Syracuse.
it yet. Stoker.
Yes, yes. Myrtle Nelson.
Yes.
I've told that, yes it is. And Laverne Stoke.
Oh, excuse me.
How do you tie in with the Willies there?
The Willies? Well,
Joseph Willie, wasn't it? It was
well,
there.
you know, we were talking about that today and wondering just how.
Well,
Well, we always called him Uncle Joe.
I'll tell you how we tie in with the Stokers. Mother's father was Jeremiah Willie. And the other Stoker was Jeremiah. They're brothers. Our grandparents were brothers. One was Jeremiah, that was our grandma, and Joe's folks were, what was his name?
Who?
Joseph, I think, Joseph Willie. And they were brothers to my mother. Or, no, they were brothers. It was my mother's father
Mother's father.
was a Willie, Jeremiah Willie. That's what.
And he was brother
Jeremiah
to
Willie
Joseph
was
Willie.
mother's father.
Yes.
Jeremiah Willie was brother
Mother's
to
father.
Joe
was
Willie.
there.
Yes.
Now, what that makes us, I don't know, because it's probably down the way.
Well, I don't know
But I know
about
that's
Joseph
right, because
Willie.
I've read that a little bit.
There's some
number of
relation
times.
anyway, but I couldn't tell you exactly.
Okay.
I think we'd be kind of mixed up if we tried to tell you. We'd have it wrong. Whatever.